first inductee is Mr. Paul Chambers. So Paul was a member of the staff from 1981 through 2014. I met Paul for the first time, I think it was in May of 1991, down in his office in Lower I Wing, where he interviewed me for the position of the medical director of the Stockton Summer Day Camp. Paul hired me for that position, and in turn, that turned into a full-time position as the athletic trainer, and here I am 28 years later, and Paul's the guy that opened the door for me. But one of the things I learned when I first got here right away was that Paul was Larry James' right-hand man. And for me, Paul and Larry will always be linked together. Larry was our gold medal winner, and he was the guy that was out in front of the program, but Paul was the guy that was behind the scenes doing what needed to be done to always make this place go. And the two of them complemented each other very well in that way. And looking at the program tonight, I couldn't help but notice that there was a nice ad in there for Paul. And one of the things that popped out there for me was that it looks like somebody in his family, I'm guessing his grandkids, call him Poppy. So that just brought back to me some of the some memories of the nicknames we had for Paul over the years. He was known at various times, he was known as P. Diddy, Paulie Paul, Uncle Paul, and then for some of us that were here way back when Paul was quite a bit younger, and he was probably quite a bit faster at that time too, there were a few of us who would refer to Paul as the wind, because Paul would just appear out of nowhere. For example, I could be walking out to the soccer field through the JK courtyard, and Paul would be walking in the opposite direction, going into the equipment room probably. And by the time I got back out to the field, I'd look up and zip, Paul's already out there ahead of me. And you would give one, I didn't see him pass me, you know, you'd give one of these. You try and figure it out. You never see him coming or going, but somehow Paul would always beat you there. And then years later, when we were in the sports center and Paul slowed down a little bit, I think he developed a telekinetic, I should say, link to any doors that unlocked in the sports center. If you unlocked a door in the sports center and then you weren't there for a couple minutes, you came back, that door was locked. You know, and for me, at that time, it would always be Chambers. And then, you know, a couple minutes later, you'd realize, my keys are in there. Now I can't even unlock the door and get in there. Chambers. But in all the time I was here with Paul, there was only one person that I ever seen him get in an argument with on our staff. One person. So who do you think that would be that could get one of the nicest guys that ever worked at Stockton upset? Well, that would be Gwathney. So again, I go back to the early 90s. Paul was the director of the Stockton Day Camp. Jim was the guy that was in charge of lunches. And at that time, the day camp was huge. There was 250, 260 kids in there. They all brought their own lunches, and so there was a lot of lunches to deal with. So let's just say lunchtime was 12 o'clock. Well, Paul would want the lunches there at 11:45 because he didn't want to worry about them being late, and he would want to make sure that the kids all had their lunches and could start eating at 12 o'clock. Now, Jim, on the other hand, Jim was going to bring the lunches at 11:59 and 58 seconds. That drove Paul crazy. So in turn, what Paul would do was on certain days, he would go and get the lunches himself and bring them out at 11:45. Then Gwathy would be going back there to get the lunches, and they'd be missing. And that would drive him crazy. And this would fester for weeks, and I shared an office with them, and they would go at it with each other, you know, and it was like the irresistible force against the immovable object. Neither one was going to give in. But it was entertaining to watch. So Paul worked here for 34 years. During that time, he oversaw club sports. He was the event and game day coordinator. He was the pool coordinator. He was the director of the Stockton Day Camp. He was the facilities manager. He supervised our student workforce. And really, there's no way that I can adequately describe everything that Paul did for athletics. Because besides those things, there were probably thousands of things he did every day, not because they were part of his job, but because he knew they needed to be done. But one thing that was clear, and President Kesselman touched on this, you know, I'm certain that Paul had an impact and an influence on hundreds, if not thousands, of students through these roles at Stockton, because that was an important part of what he did here. I think it's a little bit easier for me to describe the qualities I think I found in Paul over the years that I worked with him. I mean, one of the most important ones, I think, was Paul just wanted to come to work and do his job. He was never interested in office gossip. He was never interested in office politics. And if he was around when it's something that came up in a conversation, Paul was 86 and he was out. He didn't want any parts of it. You could always believe what Paul told you. He never pushed the personal agenda. His commitment and dedication were unrivaled. He always had the best interests of the university and athletics in thought and action, even when that was at his own expense. When you put all those things together, you got the recipe for a successful career in one place, and that's what Paul had. It's been 5 years since he retired, and we miss Paul Chambers in athletics. There were 3 staff members at Stockton who laid the foundation of Stockton athletics overall. And I'm happy to say today that all 3 of them are now in the Hall of Fame. And that trio is Larry James, Sue Newcomb, and now Paul Chambers. So I give you Paul Chambers, who is living proof that nice guys don't always finish last, and sometimes they even make it into the Hall of Fame.
Good evening, and thank you for that introduction, John. I've got to make a confession. Because he was talking about locking doors and all the things that I did, I told my wife I wasn't going to tell this story, but I'm going to tell it anyway. I did a lot of work with the sports center, Big Blue. We did the keying through plant management, and I had keys on my left hip for the I-Wing gym, and I had a ring of keys on my right hip for the sports center. Well, one day I got myself locked in a bathroom in the sports center. He talked about locking doors. I don't know why I had to lock doors, but I locked the door, and then I went into this small bathroom in between the 2 locker rooms, and the other door was locked. So there I am in the locker room, and I'm just thinking, how am I going to get out? And it came to my mind, I'll use a little penknife and I'll wedge the door open. That didn't work. I'm there an hour. I think I'm going to set the alarm off to get plant management to come over, right? And I tried to break the alarm. That didn't work. And I'm thinking, all along, the Argo's going to have a headline in the paper, Assistant Director locked in Big Blue. So all of a sudden, I did a MacGyver. I got a little trash can. I stood on the trash can, and there were these drop-down ceilings in the shower area. I pushed it off, hoping there wouldn't be a wall. I was able to go across, fall through into the locker room. I got right on the phone. Lonnie was the director of operations at the time. Lonnie, come down here right away. This is just between you and me. I showed him the mess. Everything worked out. We immediately called plant management and got him over there and put the locks in the inside of the door and put a phone in that little bathroom. So embarrassing, right? But you know what? The fact that it was me locked in there instead of a student or somebody else was the way it had to be. Because I was the guy that worked with plant management and the guy that was in charge of the keys over there to set it all up. So I found a mistake. It's really an honor for me to be inducted in the Stockton Athletic Hall of Fame. I'm truly humbled to be included in a category of distinguished staff members along with Larry James and Sue Newcomb. Larry meant so much to me that I had to stop at the field just to see that memorial or that touchstone before I came over. I'll have more to say about Larry, but Larry meant a lot to me, but when I first started working for Larry, I didn't like him. That first year in 1981 was a very demanding year. Larry had just taken over, and I'd come on as a new staff member, and he had 2 new staff members because Sue was out on maternity leave, and Jen Savio was doing compliance. So he had a lot on his shoulders, and he couldn't spend a lot of time teaching and showing the way. So he was a tiger to work for. But I'm glad he was. They were both, Larry and Sue, examples of genuine devotion to providing a great experience for our students through the athletics and recreation program. But before I get into that, I would just like to congratulate Audra, Stephanie, and the men's basketball team of 2008-2009. I can still remember all the events, the volleyball, the basketball team that seemed to be magical, never lost. They were never out of it. I can still see Stephanie spiking the ball. You know, she could get up and spike that ball. She had so many kills that when she was in the air, you knew it wasn't going to be returned. It wasn't going to be, coming back. And then Audra, what technique. And as I was talking with Audra and Kevin Chandler, what a combination. Kevin, a self-taught coach that could break down any kind of throwing event and really help the athletes. And that's something I really love about Stockton. There's a real genuine love for the students and just wanting to do whatever we can to help them. My 33 years at Stockton, beginning in 1981, were wonderful. I loved what I was doing. It wasn't a job. There was so much satisfaction for me with working with the students. They were smart. They were enthusiastic. We actually thrived off the energy that they created for us when they reached their goals. And Larry James coined a phrase that I'll always remember. The phrase was, "Catch the spirit. Catch the spirit." He would have all our student workers in the office, in the facilities, whenever the phone rang, catch the spirit. And that was for the 1986-87 men's basketball playoff team. What a team. I caught the spirit. We even had a parade down I-Wing, right across from I-Wing Gym. John Heck, who does great pictures, has a picture of me pushing a platform with all the athletes on this little platform. And we had these painter hats on. Catch the spirit. That was a lot of fun. And that was the beginning of the success at Stockton in our athletic program. For me, having the opportunity to play a small part in the advancement and improvement of the athletic and recreation program was a dream come true. The changes over the years presented many challenges. Part-time coaches to full-time coaches, faculty, facility improvements, a new sports center, staff increases, team fundraisers, college projects such as the Stockton Day Camp and the LGPA. Loved working with Val Julian on the LPGA. She had her team out there. They were united, and they got the job done. Let's hear it for Val Julian. Val, I just enjoyed working with your team. They were marvelous. And one thing I noticed about Val's softball teams, they were a unit. You could count on them for any projects, whatever was happening. They were there to help. Playing a part in making change for the better was exciting and invigorating. Larry James provided the leadership and direction to meet the challenges that come with change. It took my retirement with time for reflection to realize how much of a mentor Larry was. for me in the workplace. He truly helped up my game, by giving me the tools and encouragement to take on more responsibility. An example of that was, I'll never forget this. Larry comes up to me and he says, "Congratulations, Paul. You're the director of the Stockton Day Camp." There wasn't any discussion about it. Does Paul want to do this? Or that didn't matter. Congratulations. You're the director of the Stockton Day Camp. And all that could go through my head was, that's going to be a lot of work. While all the staff is recharging and getting ready for the fall and doing things in the summer, I'm going to be running around with 220 children all over campus. But this was an initiative by the president, and we were going to make this successful. We were going to do whatever we could to make it successful. And that's what I love about Stockton. I wasn't out there by myself with 220 children. I had plant management. I had admissions. I had all kinds of people in different offices lending a hand. I had people from other offices saying, "Hey, do you know that there are a couple of your camp kids in the locker room or in a bathroom fighting? You better get down there." You know, those kind of things. Stockton was is and was a great community where we looked out for one another. And just another thing, I love doing the housing inspections after the season was over and the students left. We'd go over to the apartments, and athletics was always part of the housing inspection. And I just loved it. I also loved working with, I knew him as Harvey. I also loved working with Harvey in the EOF program. Harvey did a great job with those students that were borderline. He showed them discipline. He showed them, that they needed to study, And our part, the athletic part of that, was to be out on the parking lot with the students and exercise them, Get them, wake them up. Have them run around the, Lake Fred, so that they'd be ready for their day. But this is what Stockton meant to me. It was community. It was love for the students, working with the students, and I just loved it all. And, when I took the Stockton Day Camp job, I said, oh, wow. I realized that they were congratulating me because they were trusting me with a responsibility that was very important, could really go south fast if you weren't on top of it, and would lead to my promotion and going forward. If you're willing to take on responsibility and do the things you need to do, you will advance. And Larry James said, "You got to go back to school." I'm going back to school for a master's in business administration at Rutgers. I want you to do the same thing. We can talk about it, So I wasn't that anxious to go back for a master's degree. So I went back for student personnel, and Larry went back for business administration, and we would talk, about our experiences. But it was another 2 nights away from my family, which was difficult. I'm so happy that Jeff Haynes is doing such a great job with club sports. It was my baby. I love club sports. You had intercollegiate, you had intramural, and you had club sports. Club sports was the incubator for a lot of varsity sports. Women's soccer, women's crew, other sports that I can't think of right now, but baseball. Baseball was a club when I came on board, but it had been intercollegiate before that. It went to club and then went back to baseball. How interesting was that, It needed time to, I guess, develop the program. That I-Wing gym, I loved that I-Wing gym. Small, but it was a great gym. Students would come to me and say, "Paul, my high school gym is better than this." I'd say, "But this gym is special. We do a lot of things in this gym. We have a lot of fun in this gym. We'll do programming that you'll just love. And I was talking to Kevin. When a team came into our gym, we were the sixth man. That balcony that goes all the way around, those students in the stands yelling, the teams coming up from the locker room in the dungeon, and all the students all around as they're coming up. I had a lot of student workers positioned so that the students get too close. But I mean, it was a lot of fun. We won a lot of games. Jerry Matthews can tell you about the games that we won in that gym that we'll never forget. The gym played a part in winning some of those games. But I'm thankful that we were able to have a sports center so that we could do multi-purpose activity. Split that gym up. In fact, before I came over here, I paid a visit to the Larry James field and track, went into the sports center. The curtains are down. You've got an activity on one side, getting ready for a parade. You've got other areas that can be used. It's a good move at the right time. In closing, I would just like to thank President Dr. Kesselman, administration, faculty, and staff, the Executive Athletic Director, Kevin McHugh, and the Athletic Department and coaches, Director of Operations, John Heck, and the Hall of Fame. There's a special place in my heart with the Hall of Fame committee because I was on the Hall of Fame committee, and I'm wearing the bracelet of our softball player, T. Bark, number 15. And I'll never forget that Hall of Fame night. Let's see, who else do I? Tony Petrilli and the athletics office staff. That's the front line in athletics, and she does a great job with her staff. I was very tight with the plant management department. I had best friends over at plant management. I was over at plant management always, and that was a very important part of the job. If you wanted your fields lined, if you wanted equipment, assembled, anything you needed, plant management was there, and I have to say something about plant management and food service. And lastly, I wouldn't be standing here before you if it wasn't for my wife, Pat, right over here, Pat Chambers. Real quick, when we got married in 1981, I was working at a Catholic community center, making maybe $12,000 a year. And she said to me, "You're not making enough money. I'm in competition with you, and if that's the way it's going to be and you want to do this kind of work, then you need a better job." So when she saw the ad in the paper for a coordinator of club sports and facilities, you need to apply for that job. So I had a friend, an acquaintance, whose children actually came to the community center, and I called him up and I said, "What's this about a job at Stockton?" He said, "Get your resume in and 3 letters of reference." Next thing I know, I got a call, and I'm coming in for an interview, which I had never been on before, an interview like this where you meet the students, you meet the different departments that you're going to be working with, you go back, you meet the director a second time. The next thing you know, Larry's calling me, and I'm hired. And I have to make a decision within 2 weeks. Within 2 weeks. And so I said to my wife, I really love my job. And she said, "You would be a fool if you did not take that job." So I said, "You're right." And the rest is history, and here I am. But she spent a lot of long nights at home with our 2 kids, raising our 2 kids. I'm going off to grad school. I'm here for basketball games, and I just love you for it, and thank you for that sacrifice. One last thing, I have a special guest here tonight that I didn't think was going to be here, and I just want to recognize him. I can't stay away from sports. When I come back to Stockton, I'm here to see the Special Olympics. And Special Olympics is here for floor hockey. And we used to have our students, I don't know if they still do it, set up the floor hockey for the Special Olympics. And I just like watching my friend, who actually works with me at a food pantry in the mornings, and that friend is right over here, J.P. Grundy. I'm very grateful to have been a part of the growth of Stockton College to Stockton University, one of the top liberal arts colleges in the nation. And I want to thank you all for being here and celebrating the fact that I'm going to be in the Hall of Fame, which I never thought would happen, but I'm so grateful to be part of it with Sue and Larry in that staff category. Thank you.